They tell you inflation is complex, that it's caused by supply chains, global markets, unforeseen shocks, that experts are working on it, and everything will stabilize soon. They're lying. Inflation isn't complicated. It's not new. And it's not an accident. It's the oldest government trick in history, and it's been destroying ordinary people's wealth for over 2,000 years. Rome didn't fall because barbarians stormed the gates. Rome fell because its government played games with money and lost. The silver coins that once built an empire were quietly hollowed out until they were worthless. Soldiers couldn't be paid, trade collapsed, trust evaporated, and by the time people realized what had happened, it was too late. The Roman currency crisis is the blueprint for every inflation that has followed. From Weimar Germany to modern America, the pattern is always the same. And if you don't learn it, you'll watch it happen to you in real time, wondering why everything feels rigged. Today, ancient Rome is going to teach you exactly how inflation destroys empires, and why it's happening again right now. For centuries, Rome's economic backbone was a single coin, the silver denarius. First minted around 211 BC, it was nearly pure silver. Trusted, stable, and accepted across the entire Mediterranean world and beyond. Roman soldiers were paid in denarii. Merchants demanded it. Families stored their wealth in it. The denarius wasn't just currency. It was confidence in metal form. Under Emperor Augustus, who ruled at the height of Rome's golden age, the denarius contained about 95% silver. It was real money, backed by tangible value. When you held a denarius, you held something that couldn't be faked, couldn't be inflated away, and couldn't lose value because a politician signed a decree. The coin's weight and purity were guaranteed, and that guarantee was Rome's promise to its people. For generations, this system worked. The empire expanded, trade flourished. Infrastructure, roads, aqueducts, forums, was built on the trust that money would hold its value. But here's the problem with empires: they get expensive. By the 2nd century AD, Rome was stretched thin. Legions defended thousands of miles of frontier against Germanic tribes, Parthians in the east, and constant internal threats. Maintaining this military machine required staggering amounts of money. And tax revenues, even from a vast empire, couldn't keep pace. So Rome's emperors faced a choice: raise taxes and risk revolt, or find another way to fund the empire. They chose debasement, and that choice would destroy them. Debasement is simple. You take a coin that's supposed to be pure silver, and you mix in cheaper metals, copper, tin, bronze. The coin still looks like silver. It's still stamped with the emperor's face. Officially, it's still worth the same, but everyone knows it's not. The numbers tell the brutal story. Under Augustus, the denarius was 95% silver. By the reign of Emperor Nero in the 1st century AD, it had dropped to about 90%. Still mostly real, but the slide had begun. By the time Caracalla ruled in the early 3rd century, the denarius contained only 50% silver. Half the coin was junk metal, and by the mid-3rd century, under Emperor Gallienus, the denarius was less than 5% silver. What had once been a solid silver coin was now a bronze disc with a thin silver wash. You could rub it between your fingers and watch the coating flake off. The people weren't stupid. They could see what was happening. So what did they do? They spent the bad coins immediately and hoarded the old, pure silver ones. This is Gresham's law in action. Bad money drives out good. The debased coins flooded the marketplace while real silver disappeared into private hoards, melted down, or shipped abroad where it still had value, and inflation exploded. When money loses its anchor to real value, prices spiral out of control. A measure of wheat that once cost a single denarius suddenly cost 10, then 50, then hundreds. Soldiers demanded higher wages to cover rising costs, forcing the government to mint even more debased coins. Merchants stopped accepting imperial currency altogether, demanding payment in gold, foreign coins, or reverting to barter. Local economies fragmented as trust in the monetary system evaporated. The government tried to fight back with force. Taxes were demanded in the worthless coins, but farmers couldn't pay. Many abandoned their lands rather than work for currency that bought nothing. The state responded with brutal measures. forced labor obligations, confiscation of property, and price controls. In 301 AD, Emperor Diocletian issued the edict on maximum prices, fixing the cost of over 1,000 goods and services, from grain to labor wages. Violators faced execution. It was a desperate attempt to stop inflation by decree. It failed spectacularly. You can't legislate value into worthless money. The black market exploded. Official trade collapsed. Goods vanished from legal markets and reappeared in underground networks where real value, not government diktat, determined prices. People learned quickly that the law couldn't make a broken coin whole. This period, known as the crisis of the 3rd century, saw nearly 50 years of chaos between 235 and 284 AD. Emperors rose and fell at a dizzying pace, some reigning only months before assassination. Behind the political drama was a financial system in ruins. Rome's legions, once invincible, became unreliable because they couldn't be paid in money worth anything. Invasions increased. Provinces broke away. The empire that had dominated the world for centuries was tearing itself apart. And at the center of it all was a currency crisis. Eventually, Constantine the Great introduced a new coin, the gold solidus, around 312 AD. It was pure gold, consistent in weight, and it restored some stability. But by then, the Western Roman Empire was beyond saving. The debasement of the denarius had hollowed out Rome's economic core. Armies dissolved, trade networks fractured, trust was gone. The fall of Rome wasn't a single battle or barbarian invasion. It was a long unraveling, and currency collapse was one of its sharpest threads. Rome's story isn't unique, it's the template. Every major inflationary crisis since then has followed the same pattern. Governments debase money to cover costs they can't afford. Inflation spirals, the people suffer, and elites protect themselves with real assets. Fast forward to Weimar Germany in the 1920s. Crushed by war reparations after World War I, Germany printed marks to cover debts it couldn't pay. By 1923, hyperinflation was raging. A loaf of bread that cost 1 mark before the war cost 200 billion marks by November 1923. Workers were paid twice a day because morning wages were worthless by evening. Life savings evaporated. Pensioners starved. And just like in Rome, those who held real assets, land, factories, foreign currency, survived and even thrived, while everyone trusting paper money was wiped out. Zimbabwe in the 2000s repeated the pattern. Facing collapsing production and rising debts, the government turned to the printing press. By 2008, inflation reached 89.7 sextillion% annually. Prices doubled every single day. Eventually, Zimbabwe abandoned its currency entirely. Once again, a government thought it could cheat reality. Once again, ordinary people paid the price. But you don't need to look at extreme cases. Even in modern developed economies, the Roman playbook is alive and well. In 1971, President Richard Nixon ended the gold standard, severing the dollar's last link to tangible value. From that moment, the US dollar became fiat currency, backed not by gold, but by trust in government. And just as in Rome, the temptation to spend beyond means became irresistible. Over the past 50 years, US debt has exploded. The money supply has expanded massively. And while we haven't seen wheelbarrows of cash, we've witnessed steady erosion of purchasing power. $1 in 1971 buys what takes over $6 today. The bills look the same. The value has been hollowed out. It's debasement by printing press instead of coin clipping. But the result is identical. So what does Rome teach us about inflation today? 3 critical lessons. First, inflation is not an accident. It's policy. It's the government's method of paying debts and funding expenses without directly taxing citizens. Every time a central bank prints money or expands the money supply, they're debasing the currency just like Roman emperors debased the denarius. The method changes, but the theft remains the same. Second, the people always pay the price. In Rome, it was the soldiers, farmers, and merchants whose savings became worthless. In Weimar, it was pensioners and workers. In Zimbabwe, it was families who watched their bank accounts turn to dust, and today it's wage earners watching their paychecks buy less every year, while being told the economy is strong. Inflation is a silent tax that hits hardest those who can't protect themselves. Third, real wealth survives when paper promises fail. In every collapse, Rome, Weimar, Zimbabwe, those who held tangible assets came through. Land that produces food, precious metals that can't be printed, skills and networks that create value regardless of currency. The people who trusted government money lost everything. The people who understood what real value means survived. Rome's currency crisis proves that financial systems, no matter how powerful they seem, are fragile. When money stops being real, everything built on it crumbles. Trade breaks down, armies dissolve, governments lose legitimacy. The barbarians may finish the job, but the real destruction happens inside the treasury. The fall of Rome wasn't about corruption or decadence or barbarian invasions. It was about the destruction of money. When emperors chose short-term survival over long-term stability, when they decided to cheat their own people with debased coins, they set in motion a collapse that took centuries to complete, but was ultimately inevitable. And here's what should terrify you. We're watching the same pattern unfold right now. Governments drowning in debt, central banks printing trillions, purchasing power eroding year after year. The methods are more sophisticated, the propaganda more refined, but the underlying mechanics are identical to Rome's. History doesn't repeat exactly, but the laws of money never change. Debasement destroys trust. Inflation transfers wealth from the many to the few. And when the collapse comes, those holding paper are left with nothing, while those holding real assets survive. Rome had 500 years to learn this lesson. We've had 2,000 years of examples since. If we ignore them, we deserve what's coming. If this changed how you see inflation, hit subscribe. History has the answers. I'll show you where to look.